Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. Today is Monday, February the 1st, and it's the start of a new month, and I think we can all be glad about that. 2021 has started to drag on a little bit. It's only February, but we're getting there. And speaking of things kind of dragging on and illnesses, epidemics, pandemics, I thought this was a good time to bring on our own AL.com and ESPN sideline reporter, Lauren Sisler, to talk about something she's really passionate about, and that is destigmatizing drug addiction. She is here to tell us a little bit about her story, why she's so passionate about this, and also tell us about a documentary that she has coming out that actually premieres tonight. So, Lauren, thanks for coming and sitting down with us and telling us why you're so passionate about this. And this drug epidemic is not completely different than the pandemic that we are all experiencing right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on, Ivana. I really appreciate it. And of course, I always enjoy your lunch break shows here. And thank you all for watching. And, first and foremost, we are in the midst of a pandemic, but also in the midst of an epidemic. And, a big part of that, obviously, is surrounding the pandemic. And one thing that comes to mind and has been a catalyst for this is the isolation, the social distancing. People are having to, kind of stay indoors, obviously, having to social distance. And really the isolation piece of it has created, some anxiety, the challenges, financial concerns, whether or not I'm going to have a job when all this is over, how am I going to put food on the table? There's so many things that have triggered the increase in the epidemic, the opioid drug use epidemic, alcohol, drug addiction, all being part of that. And of course, mental health. And so, now more than ever, the CDC is actually saying there seems to be quite an overlap as studies are coming in over the last 12-month period. Over the course of the last year, they've actually seen more drug overdose deaths than they have in a 12-month period ever in the history of I guess ever in the history, right? And so, just trying to get in front of this and really trying to understand what addiction is. What is addiction? What drives people to be afraid to speak up and speak out? And that is the goal of this documentary, and the goal of this event that we'll share tonight is to destigmatize addiction, destigmatize substance use disorder, and allow people to really see that it is a disorder, it is a disease, it is an illness, and there are resources and there is help out there, but people are so afraid to talk about it.
And something that I think is so interesting about you and the fact that this is something you're so passionate about is a lot of people don't want to talk about drug addiction, substance use disorder. People, just like you said, are ashamed, and you have some personal experience with this. And something that I think is very interesting is you're very open about that journey, and you're very open about how your journey into sports reporting really pulled you out of that shame that you felt from your family's history of substance abuse disorder. So I know this is something that you're really going to detail tonight in that documentary, but could you just tell us a little bit about your family's history with drug addiction and the shame that brought onto you, even though you yourself did not have a disorder?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely anxious to kind of outline things in a documentary, but I love to paint this picture and sort of this illustration. So I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, and it was my mom and my dad and my older brother, Alan. And, we were a busy family, always on the go, always involved in sports, which, is kind of where my love for sports has come from and derived from, of course. But, my parents were always very involved in everything that we did, always, there to support us, love us unconditionally. Were we perfect? Absolutely not. No family is perfect. There's always dysfunction. There's always crazy stuff happening. But at the end of the day, I felt very loved, and I felt that I had all the resources and the tools to succeed. Well, my vision and goal growing up was to be a collegiate gymnast. So I know most people always, I joke about this, Ivana. I'm sitting down right now, but I'm 5'9". So everyone's like, what? Wait, you're a gymnast? I'm like, yeah, crazy, right? So that was always my lifelong dream. Growing up, I wanted to be a collegiate gymnast and compete at the next level. And so I kind of set my sights on that early on in middle school and into high school, and then was able to sign a scholarship with Rutgers University to compete there for them. And, here I am with my life in front of me. I'm excited. I'm living out my dream, and, have this opportunity to compete for a team and compete for somebody more than just myself. And so fast forward to my second semester at Rutgers, and both of my parents, we kept a very close relationship with both my parents. I picked up the phone all the time, would call them, even though I was 8 hours away. I felt like I wanted to have that connection with them every day. So I picked up the phone like I always did, had a conversation with them. We exchanged our I love yous and hung up the phone, and that was it. And everything seemed fine. But then, unfortunately, that night, I received a phone call from my father that my mom had passed away. And then told me to get on the next plane I could and be at the airport to pick me up. And unfortunately, he would not show up that day. And he too passed away, both of my parents, from prescription drug overdoses within just a few hours of each other.
And this is something that unfortunately, I think so many people, especially here in this country, are familiar with and have family members that they have lost to prescription drug overdoses or that have problems using prescription drugs. And the fact that you, as a successful reporter working sideline reporting with ESPN, are able to come out and say, look, I tragically lost both of my parents to this disease. Here's what I'm going to do about it. How long did it take you to come to terms with saying my parents both died from overdoses?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a long journey, because I know that I sit here so boldly and courageously, and thank you for the comments there, Rose and Charles and Brandon and Dana and everyone, watching this right now. I have a lot of confidence and I guess courage to share the story, but it wasn't always like that. And I think that also was because it was attached to the shame and to the acceptance and to the denial of what had happened. Okay. So, after my parents passed away, I'm left figuring out how I'm going to pick up the pieces. It's me and my brother. And I was so thankful to have family and friends surrounding me, my aunt and uncle, specifically my mom's older sister, who really kind of helped me to pick up the pieces and say, hey, we got to keep moving forward. So I went back to Rutgers 2 weeks after my parents had passed away. You got a commitment to yourself, your school, your teammates, you got to go back to school. And so that's what I did. And I think that kind of forced me to sort of run from reality in many ways, because I just went back to school. That's what I knew. That's what that was the chapter in my life that I was in. And I really never took the time to acknowledge what had happened to my parents. Like, there were some discussions and kind of behind the scenes conversations about what actually happened to them on that day. But I chose to put up the blinders and ignore it. I chose to use a sugar-coated story when people would ask me, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your parents. What happened? Because the assumption is both of them pass away within a few hours of each other. Maybe it's a car accident. People just, they're curious, but they're afraid to ask too many questions. And, I would just say my mom died of respiratory failure. My dad died of a heart attack. Because here's the thing, respiratory failure to me sounds so much better than overdose, right? Or addiction. And so I told that story, and then my dad died of a heart attack. Well, his heart stopped because of respiratory failure, because he overdosed on his medication. And so I justified these things in my head for so many years, because if I didn't acknowledge the truth, if I didn't sit down and really, really have that conversation with my aunt and my uncle, who had seen the toxicology reports and seen the autopsy reports and knew exactly what happened, then I didn't have to acknowledge the truth. And so I ran from reality for years and years and years and years. It was 7 years before I actually even allowed my aunt in a public setting. And when I say public, meaning myself, her, and my colleague at work, for her to actually share with them what truly happened without me shutting her down and being afraid of what that person was going to think when they found out the truth of what happened to my parents. And then it was actually 10 years before I even opened up that folder, that manila envelope that had the autopsy and toxicology reports for my parents. So 10 years, I ignored it. My aunt walked out of the coroner's office 90 days after my parents passed and said, hey, here's the report. Do you want to read it? I said no, threw it in the floorboard. I had no desire to read what was on there, because I was scared. I was ashamed. I was grieving. I was angry. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to my family? I just don't get it. And so I just ran from reality for so many years. But then as I started to work up the courage and realize that, my parents were fighting a disease, they were fighting a concealed battle with addiction. And perhaps what led them to not go get help was because of the shame and the fear of the judgment, is what I was experiencing myself. I was afraid to speak up and speak out and about what had happened to my parents. And so that realization, the light went off and I said, wow, I can actually make a difference if I share their story boldly with courage. And what's even more amazing, Ivana, you brought up the sports thing. So I've had this opportunity to cover, so many awesome sporting events, so many different things. I mean, we're here in the state of Alabama, right? I know we covered many a national championships. You've got the collage behind you that, that reminds everyone of where you're at right now in the state of Alabama with Alabama and Auburn, always competing for national championships. And, what's crazy about it, I get to tell these stories, right? I get to tell these stories of these athletes, these coaches, the fans, the community. But, oh, by the way, I'm silenced from sharing my own story because I'm afraid of what people are going to think. I'm afraid people are going to think lesser of me, lesser of my family, and my parents' legacy will be destroyed forever. But that's where I started to turn the page and realize that I can't live in silence anymore. And if I'm out here being a journalist and sharing other people's story, then I need to share my own story with courage and really just with honesty and truth. And I'm telling you, the truth set me free.
It is just, it's so powerful just to sit here and listen to you tell this story, because I think about my parents who, luckily are still with us, and I'm so thankful for them every day. But I think about so many of us have lost somebody we've loved. And no matter what way that is, whether it is due to substance abuse, whether it is due to a car accident, either way, it hurts. And it almost at a point we think, well, it doesn't matter how they left us, they have left us. And it seems like for that kind of decade period is how you felt that, look, it doesn't matter, they're gone, I have to grieve, I got to keep going. And, whether it was a car accident or not, they wouldn't be here. But you make that comment about maybe if they could have gotten help, they would still be here today. So I want to ask you, how are you trying to help people who are in a situation that is either like yours or maybe those who might have a substance abuse disorder themselves?
Yeah, so obviously we talk about the documentary, and tonight we are premiering this documentary. It's a 20-minute documentary, so it's really the footnotes version of my story that really outlines and illustrates sort of the progression with my parents, because both my parents were experiencing chronic pain, going to a pain management doctor over the course of several years. And, this was not something that just happened overnight. This was something that progressed over time. And, that's what I want to show people in this documentary. Is that this can happen to anyone. Nobody is exempt from addiction. Nobody is exempt from substance use disorder. Like anything else in this life, anything can be abused. And so I think it's so important to kind of bring that to light and to realize, like, we've got to break down these barriers and these, these profiles that we put on people in society, right? It does not matter where you grew up, the car you drive, the money you make, the job you hold, none of that matters. And of course, there is some sort of there is some genetic predisposition to addiction, but also there are choices and there's education. And that is the key in all of this, the education. So my hope through showing this documentary is to provide the education and just awareness that that we need to be able to overcome this epidemic that we're facing. And so following the documentary, we'll have a panel discussion. My good friend, Jim Dunaway, with the Jocks Roundtable. He's worked with us and done some great things with us at AL.com as well. A good friend of AL.com's. He will be moderating the panel discussion. We'll also be joined by Dr. Stephen Taylor. He is the medical director of the NBA, that's the National Basketball Association's Player Assistance and Anti-Drug Program. Also the chief medical officer of Pathway Healthcare and Recovery Centers. So, thankful to have him on board to really kind of share some of the medical aspects of things and really just how we can do our job to educate, because education is key, education and prevention, but also providing hope and recovery for those that have already gone down that path and are looking for a way out. So that event happening tonight, 7 p.m. Central Time. And I'm just really excited to be able to bring that to everyone who is interested in tuning in.
Got just a couple of questions, even circling back a little bit to your story for you. And you talk about how both of your parents had experienced chronic pain problems for quite a while before they passed away. And I know you say you had a great childhood and everything, nobody's perfect, but that you loved your family. When you left for college, did you have any idea that your parents had a problem?
That's such a great question, and one that I do get often. Hindsight's always 20/20, because there were little red flags here and there. But because of my lack of education and really just sort of kind of having tunnel vision, so focused on school and gymnastics, I just thought my parents were in pain. This was normal. But for my parents, going to a pain management doctor, they were being prescribed this medication. So surely it's okay, right? This is the doctor's telling them to take it. This is helping them to function, to get out of bed in the morning, to go to work, to do what they needed to do to live somewhat of a normal life. My parents seemed like happy people. Obviously, I knew they were in pain, but the pain medication helped to bring the smile back to their face. And so I thought it was okay. But there was an incident, at Thanksgiving when I actually came home for the holidays when I was at Rutgers, that my dad had overdosed. And we found him that morning, barely breathing, and called 911. And we were able to get him the assistance that he needed and into the hospital. But I was told that my dad had a bad reaction to medication. That was what my mom told me. Bad reaction to medication. In my mind was, oh man, he must have just taken this cholesterol medicine with this and it mixed and it was just, a bad reaction. So that was it. And I just moved on. And so I really didn't see that. There was some financial strain, for a good bit of my, high school years going into college. I knew there were some issues there. And then there was an incident when I was at Rutgers where my mom pretty much said, hey, we can't afford to keep you at Rutgers. I was still on scholarship, but there was still a lot of financial strain and some things that they had to pay for. And I remember her being very angry and upset about it, but it didn't register to me until later, because then my dad said, hey, your mom ran out of her medication. She's just on edge. She's upset. But we got her medication. She's fine now. And then she called me up a couple of days later. She apologized. Everything was fine. So in my mind, I just, again, compartmentalized it and moved on. And it was just so easy to do at the time.
And you talk about that. And I think I went to college and lived at home, actually. And I remember being 18 and saying like, oh, I don't want to live here. Let me go somewhere else. I want an apartment. I don't want to live here. And of course, your parents are going to be like, no, that's ridiculous. You're living at home. So you think about, like you said, your mom getting aggravated at you. And in a way, it's just like my mom still gets mad at me, and still scolds me for things. And you wouldn't think twice about it if you didn't have a frame of reference for there being a problem in the first place. It's just one of those things like, oh, I apparently said something I shouldn't have said. I, made an action I shouldn't have made. And that's why they're mad at me, because as much as we love our parents, we know that they are often there to scold us and to get mad at us. So I can totally understand that, not realizing that that was part of a bigger problem. But something that I think is interesting too is when I say we, I think that I can confidently say most of us here in this country often correlate drug addiction and parents with drug addiction with poverty, with kids that maybe show outward signs of abuse at home or outward signs of something being wrong at home. We don't often think of happy kids that are involved in tons of extracurricular activities, athletics, etc., and those parents that are showing up to those athletic events. We don't really expect those people to be the ones that have a substance use disorder. Do you think that there are other people that are out there like you that really are in the dark about what's happening in their family?
Absolutely. I think that there are so many people that are in the dark about it, whether it's their children that are going to school every day. You mentioned that extracurricular activities. I see this time and time again with so many athletes that go out there, they want to compete, they tear an ACL, they blow out a shoulder or whatever it may be. They go to the doctor, they get medication, and next thing you know, they're going to the person next to them's locker to get the medication they need because they have become addicted to it. And then it travels down that slippery slope to heroin use, because essentially that is a different form of an opiate drug. And so, you see this progression and this transition into addiction, and it can happen right in front of you without you knowing. And that's the craziest part, because, even with, our elderly population, grandmas and grandpas, people out there that go to their doctor and get these prescription medications, these things have to be monitored. And I think we have to be advocates for ourselves. So when we go to the doctor, we need to be educated on the questions that we need to ask those doctors when we go in there. And also, know ourselves, right? Know what works for us and know what doesn't, and be aware. This just doesn't feel right. Or, man, I woke up this morning and I feel like I've got to have this drug. I've got to have this thing. And so that's where you have to have also that self-awareness to know that something is becoming a problem. And I think that's where we have to do our job to educate ourselves, to be empowered, to be equipped with that, so that we can try to stop it in its tracks before it becomes a major problem. But yeah, I mean, it's happening right in front of us. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand is everyone is tied to addiction. Everyone is impacted by it. And, I think that's where, people do have that perception that it comes in a certain shape or size. Even myself, when I started to, acknowledge what had happened to my parents, there was that part of me that was like, well, my parents are different because they're prescription drug addicts. That's different than the person shooting up heroin under the bridge. But not really, because that person has a story and something led them to that place. They didn't start out there, but that's where they ended up. So I think that's where we really have to break that stigma as well, to realize that there's so many different forms of it, and it comes in the form of alcohol, drugs. There's so many addictions out there, obviously, gambling, financial struggles, and, financial addictions, shopping. Look, we're all in on that, right? Eating, food. There's so many different types of addictions out there that we can become, trapped by without even realizing it.
And I love what you said about how, people that maybe go to a doctor and are prescribed a certain thing need to be advocates for themselves. I've had so many conversations with my parents and that generation of saying, look, you have to be an advocate for yourself now. You cannot just depend on somebody to prescribe you something and everything gets better, or to tell you to do something and everything get better. You got to be an advocate for yourself, ask the questions that you need to ask. And Lauren, we talk about kids and we talk about your childhood. I want to quickly ask you before we go, and before you give us all the information on how to watch your documentary and your panel tonight, tell us about what you're trying to do with a scholarship that you're creating.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm trying to create a scholarship because here's the thing. I think that we oftentimes feel like we become a product of our circumstance. And you kind of brought that up about how, people fall into these traps, or fall into, you have this vision of what the home life is like, and, what their upbringing is. Well, I just want to encourage, students, especially those that have been devastated by addiction with family members and loved ones, whether they have loved ones that have fallen into addiction, or have been incarcerated because of addiction, have fallen into addictive behaviors and been in some drug dealing situations. I really want to bring a light to those people. I want to bring a light to those, those boys and girls, those young men and women who feel like they become a product of their circumstances and cannot get out of it. I want to show them a better pathway. I want to show them a pathway to success. And I want to encourage them that they are worth it. They are qualified. They can go out there and achieve great success, no matter what it is they've been through throughout the early part of their lives. And so I'm hoping to create a scholarship fund. We're still in the early phases of getting that done, but I want to create a scholarship fund to be able to give to those young students who aspire to further their education, whatever that looks like, and to give them the tools and the resources and really the hope and the encouragement and the inspiration that they are worth it and that they can achieve that.
So these are the questions I have for you. One, where do we catch your documentary and panel tonight? Two, where can we find more information about this scholarship fund that you're looking to create?
Awesome. Okay, so event tonight, you can go to my website, laurensisler.com/sidelines. You can go register there. We will also be broadcasting live from my public Facebook page. That's Lauren Sisler, Sisler. And we'll be broadcasting live. We'll go live at 7 p.m. Central Time is when the event starts, but we're actually going to go out a little bit earlier so people can actually share it. So we're hoping to get one big watch party going on, so people can share it from their social media accounts as well. But you can also register for tickets, free virtual event, and that will give you all the information you need as well for the link and everywhere you can go to watch that tonight at 7 o'clock Central Time. But like I said, I encourage you guys to jump on, share it with your family and friends. It's going to be a great discussion. I think a very powerful discussion that even if you don't think that addiction impacts you, it absolutely does. And you need to equip yourself and to be, empowered to know what to look look for, signs and symptoms, and really why we're here today to break this stigma. And I think it's going to be very powerful. And then in terms of the scholarship, Ivana, at this point, if you would like to make contributions or be a part of that, the Addiction Prevention Coalition is accepting those donations. I guess that the funds for that, and with the memo Beyond the Sidelines, or BTS, we're calling this event Beyond the Sidelines. So the goal is get off the sidelines, get in the game, and help us on this mission. And so, if you want to contribute to that, you can certainly do so. Also, I can be reached on social media, as well as my email, Lauren@laurensisler.com. So if you have any questions there, feel free to reach out. And, just excited for this journey, and just thankful that I finally have found a voice, and that I'm able to use this opportunity that I've had at AL.com and ESPN to be able to use my voice and to just be, a vessel of hope for people that are out there struggling, and to be, an advocate, for this pandemic and this epidemic that we're facing right now, in the midst of all this. And just hope that, we can get as many people as much help as possible, and equip people and empower people to make the right decisions moving forward.
I am going to make sure we put all that information on where we can catch that event tonight, and all that other information. I'll put it here in the comments. So if you missed it, and instead of having to rewind, watch it back, I'll leave those links, leave all that information here. I know we also have a couple people who had some kind of specific addiction and help questions. I'm sure Lauren would love to take those. I'll leave her email here as well, so you can contact Lauren directly. And I want to make a quick shout out. I see Dana's commented, say that she is 13 years sober. So she or he, actually, I'm not sure. But Dana, congratulations on 13 years sober. I just had to, give you a shout out here. So Lauren, thanks so much for coming, for breaking this down. I'll leave all the info here, and I guess we will just have to see you tonight.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Thank you all so much for your love and support. It means the world to me, and I hope you guys will tune in.
Awesome. And Dana, it's a he. So I'm so glad you're 13 years sober. Again, sorry about that pronoun mixed up. But
Dana, we hope you'll tune in tonight. And thank you. And we're so proud of you. Keep up the great work.
Absolutely. Everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.